Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our session. Our goal today is to understand what sustainability data actually is and how we can utilize it to not only meet the expectations of the regulator, but actually gain business advantage, competitive advantage, and use it as a tool of a fiscally responsible organization, because there is so much more that sustainability data can be than it currently is. And the main reason, or one of the main reasons for that, is that we rely on averages, we rely on estimations, because it is so difficult to get to the actual supply chain and understand what's going on there, unless, of course, you're using ImpactOS. My name is Jone Korpi, and I have the distinct pleasure of serving as your host this morning. And pursuant to that responsibility, which has been hoisted on my shoulder, I'm going to go through a couple of items of housekeeping. First, questions. We have received a bunch of questions beforehand, so we will spend most of the time with our experts going through those questions. That being said, if there are any questions you want to ask, we welcome them to the chat and we will get back to you via email if we don't have time to go through them at the end of the presentations. Secondly, recording. A recording of this webinar will be available after the fact, so you may share it with your colleagues or you may come back to it yourself as you choose. I have the pleasure of being joined by two incredible experts this morning. The first of them is a man whose name doesn't make much sense. It literally translates to Tower Rapids, which is interesting to say the least. But thankfully, it's not the name that makes the man, but the man that makes the name. And Sami has really made his name in the sustainability space in the last quarter of a century, with a career spanning over 80 different countries. The first keynote will be presented by Sami, and I think that's enough of an introduction. So welcome, Sami, to the presentation.
Hello, everybody. That was quite an introduction. Thank you, Jone. So, as Jone said, my name is Sami Tornikoski from ImpactOS, and I'm here to talk to you about sustainability data, how to automate it, and what it means for your organization. Well, a little bit of context about myself. I've been working quite extensively over the past 25 years with different industries in different continents, particularly focusing on their sustainability issues, particularly sustainability related to global supply chains and how individual suppliers in their performance at a very local level, so that also the major buyers can benefit from that. This year alone, I've worked directly with over 150 companies here in Finland. And across these decades, countries and conversations, one thing that comes up over and over again is companies already know how hard it is to get primary sustainability data, particularly from their supply chains, often called as Scope 3, because they have little to no visibility into their supply chains. They know that they need the data and they have made huge investments trying to collect it, but they failed so far. Most of them are still relying on endless spreadsheets, might sound familiar, emails, consultants, or maybe even carrier pigeons to try and collect this data. They're so fixed on the way things have always been done that they can't even imagine how it could be any different. So they see the problem, but they can't see the way out from it. In fact, we've asked this question a lot, believe me. Every time the answer is the same. Most companies have almost no visibility beyond tier 1, i.e. their direct suppliers. This means that when you ask data from your supply chain, around 95 of these requests go unanswered. No response, no data. And yet, this year alone, we have approximately 50,000 companies in Europe reporting their Scope 3 for CSRD regulation, the sustainability reporting regulation that many of you are at least a little bit familiar and some are painfully familiar with. So I really don't think this needs to be another discussion about regulations or omnibus, because that topic is never about the value of the data, only absence of it. Let's think about what this means for the reports that have already been made and are coming out this year. So what do the current sustainability reports actually tell you about your business and how you are performing? You are relying on industry averages or secondary databases for your emission data and other sustainability impact data. It's nearly impossible to meet your sustainability targets, at least when it comes to your supply chain, because you don't actually know where you can or should be focusing. You're missing potential risks that could be avoided if you only had the visibility to information what's going on, particularly in your supply chains. So basically, even though the reports have been made with huge effort and investment, they provide little or no business insight. And that's what we want to really talk about. And of course, somewhere in your organization, there is a head of sustainability quietly losing their mind. Maybe you might be just a person, hopefully not, because they have been given an impossible task. So what is the task? To reduce emissions you can't measure, from suppliers you cannot see, on a timeline you didn't or they didn't choose in the supply chain, with tools that were built for reporting, not for decision making. They're expected to create change across the supply chain they don't control, probably armed with spreadsheets, few PDFs, and a lot of hope, and maybe even more coffee than just hope. And they are not alone, these sustainability experts. Well, they might be alone in their silo, but not in their sorrow. The entire organization within a company is affected. And here are some real-life examples. Maybe you can identify yourself from these examples. So there is somebody in marketing suffering because they can't back up the sustainability claims in their product marketing material. Or there is somebody in sales struggling with an RFP, expected to provide detailed supply chain data with nothing but the annual report to play with. Maybe there is somebody in procurement buried under 37 versions of the same Excel file, trying to compare suppliers using made-up numbers. Maybe there's somebody in finance pretending that the risk models still make sense, hoping no one notices the supply chain is held together by average data. And then there's legal. At least there's somebody smiling, because legal is writing an epic tale of disclaimers just to avoid getting sued over half-truths we all agreed to call reporting. So how did we end up in this situation? The reality is the way we currently approach Scope 3, the supply chain, is a system built to fail, at least the way we see it. It was designed for reporting, not for action. It's slow and backward-looking. It gives you number, not real insight. We've created a system where you can be compliant without being actually correct, where you can measure your impact without actually knowing what's happening in your value chain. And this isn't just a technical flaw, it's a strategic risk. Because you don't have the real data, then your targets are misaligned, your strategy is built on sand, and your reporting becomes a story you tell yourself rather than a tool to drive your business. So what's really happening with the sustainability data is that we are demanding information that really doesn't even exist yet in most part. We're asking for visibility into the supply chains that no one can actually really see properly as of today. We expect suppliers, often smaller companies, focused on running their core business, to provide complex impact data, in this case associated with sustainability. We demand it from that data, even though they don't have the tools or they cannot afford the tools to do this, or they don't have the knowledge. Most of the companies are SMEs with very limited capacity and past experience on sustainability topics, let alone sustainability data generation. They most of the time don't have the time, at least, to address these sustainability data requests because they have more important business to focus on, i.e., keeping their companies alive. And most importantly, they don't know why they should even bother because there's no benefit from doing it for themselves. So meanwhile, customers are sending out these data requests to their suppliers, not as collaborators, but as auditors. A single provider might receive tens of these requests from their different customers and still have no clue what to do about them. Companies are sending these requests without support, context, or shared benefit. We are working under the assumption that if we ask, they will answer. But that's not really happening, is it? So what does this really look like? Well, at first, it's just people shouting into the void, i.e., your supply chains. They can't even see who's out there. They don't know who they're asking. They're just shouting. Not surprisingly, very little comes back. Then maybe they get a little bit further and they see their tier 1 suppliers. At least they should have their emails or maybe phone numbers and names. But it's like standing at the edge of a canyon. You shout your request across the canyon, and there's somebody on the other side who has no idea what you're talking about or why they even should respond. They are not ignoring you. They're just having nothing to give. Another way to look at it, imagine a cascading waterfall. The data is the water. But instead of the water flowing downstream, every time it drops off the edge, it vanishes into the pool. There is no system to carry it forward, no structure, no reason for the water to keep flowing. This is the system we have today. It's a system where the very thing we need, primary data, shared visibility, actionable insight, it never makes through to you or other companies who are in desperate need for this information. So this is a problem on a truly global scale, one where we need to stop thinking of data collection as the job of one person in one function in your organization, or assuming that every company we will ask questions will have somebody sitting there whose job it is to answer these questions however we want to ask them. That's unrealistic. So the solution is turning Scope 3 supply chain data into common but differentiated responsibility. Now, I recognize that this is a fairly tall order, but in the wise words of Nelson Mandela, everything seems impossible until it's done. And I also understand that the problem of creating primary sustainability data might be a difficult concept for some to grasp. So let's dig into that a little bit deeper. The thing is that there has been, and there are examples where this has been done successfully before. I can give you an example of a problem that no single organization could solve on its own, one of which, just like sustainability data, requires millions of people to participate in order to solve the challenge collectively. To make that happen, you need structure, you need process, and incentives that work at scale. So let's look at the early 2000s. At the time, libraries and publishers around the world had a challenge. They wanted to digitize their archives, books, newspapers, and documents, but the optical character recognition, OCR, wasn't perfect, especially with older text. The scans needed human help to correct them, and there were billions of words to process. No single person or organization could do this alone. So, enter Luis Fonan from Guatemala, who invented reCAPTCHA. Many of you may be familiar with this. You know those little boxes on the websites where you have to prove that you are not a robot? the ones that ask you to type in these distorted words or click on all the traffic lights on images, well, those were not just security tools. They were also quietly helping to digitize the world's books. Every time you completed reCAPTCHA, you were transcribing a word that OCR couldn't read. Not just for one company, but for everyone. One click at a time. Millions of people help solve a problem too big for any one person, library, or archive. That's shared distributed problem solving. It shows how big problems can be solved with small distributed contributions, and it shows the power of structure and design to enable participation at a large scale. And that's exactly the kind of structure we need to unlock supply chain transparency. Because the data you need isn't sitting in a database somewhere. That's a misconception. It lives with the people doing the work, the suppliers, the producers, the operators at the edge of your value chain, and they will not contribute unless the system works for them too, not only to serve your interests. This isn't the only time we've seen a shared system unlock massive distributed participation. Let's look at another example of how platforms have reshaped the world around us. I'm not taking a position regarding the sustainability of these example companies I'm using here, but I'm more interested to demonstrate the business model and operating model, how they were successful and still are so. I know that you've heard these examples millions of times, but for a good reason. So Uber, the largest taxi company in the world, they don't own any taxis. Airbnb, the largest hotel company, owns no rooms. And Amazon, the largest retailer, owns no stores. So, what do all these companies have in common? They didn't solve a logistics problem, for example, in this case, collecting sustainability data. By scaling up their own assets, they solved it by offering solutions which made it easy for others to participate. And here's the key. Everyone wins when the system is designed to work for everyone. That's the kind of thinking that will generate the data we all need. Because the suppliers, the one who hold the data and are responsible for generating that primary data, aren't just data providers. They are participants, partners, and stakeholders. They are you in the audience today. We need to stop thinking of them as source of the problem and start seeing them as the key to the solution. But they will only contribute this information and data and help to generate it in the first place if the system works for them too. It gives them value, clarity, and control. What's really exciting is that this isn't theoretical. It already exists. It's called ImpactOS. And it's why I'm here today. We didn't start by trying to fix reporting because the real value isn't in compliance or regulations or reporting. At least that's what we claim. No one in any organization needs reports for the sake of reports or compliance for the sake of compliance. There's always a reason for these things. The reason is for better marketing stories, for better USPs, to stand out from your competition, and it's also able to make better decisions throughout the organization. It's really about understanding and analyzing the risks and opportunities in your supply chain. And that kind of insight is only possible when you have real data, which comes directly from the source, i.e. from the suppliers. So instead of trying to extract information, we built a system, ImpactOS platform, where suppliers can participate, contribute, and benefit because it was designed with them in mind. And once you understand that it has to bring value to suppliers, not just your own organization, you will understand that it's never been about data collection. It's about data creation and helping your suppliers and partners to do just that so that you will ultimately also benefit. Because you cannot collect or automate something that doesn't exist. And this is how we should have approached it from the very beginning. If we want better data, we have to stop treating suppliers like passive data sources. We need to give them the tools, the ability, and the incentive to participate by creating systems that work for them, not just for us. When suppliers gain visibility into their own operations and understand how the data helps them to improve, compete, and grow, they are motivated to act. Currently, we are not seeing much of the motivation, at least based on how we discuss a lot of the customers and companies today. So when the system is well designed like our ImpactOS platform, it becomes part of how they work, not an added burden, but a shared benefit. That's when everyone wins, because you get better data, they get stronger businesses, and the whole system becomes more transparent, resilient, and fair. This principle is at the core of our platform. So now let's go back to the waterfall. Let's imagine the same waterfall we discussed earlier, but this time the water doesn't disappear. It flows through structured, connected system. That is the data. The data is captured, channeled, and carried forward across the entire supply chain to organizations like maybe yours, who is interested also to receive this information for various purposes. A connected ecosystem where primary data flows automatically. And this doesn't change just your sustainability data, it transforms your entire organization. Sustainability, procurement, and finance can collaborate to identify supply chain risks to their business based on real sustainability data and allocate their resources to mitigate those risks. This could mean, for example, identifying the highest risks in the supply chain and collaborating with suppliers to enable investments that reduce their impacts in key risk categories. Could be water, could be greenhouse gas emissions, or maybe workplace-related incidents. Marketing, on the other hand, can avoid making unsubstantiated green claims when there is reliable, real data about the company's operations, including the supply chain. This is both a competitive advantage and can be a way to avoid also legal risks. Sales can credibly sell the sustainability of their solutions based on real and validated, reliable data, and even charge a sustainability premium when there's more concrete evidence to back their claims. So by creating the collection and then also automating collection of primary data, we enable a true sustainability transformation across the organization. Not just in sustainability, but in all functions, as we just discussed. And this transformation reaches all the way to the corner office, where leadership can also finally make confident, data-driven decisions that balance performance with sustainability impact. Because when everybody has access to real and connected data, sustainability stops being about compliance and becomes a strategic advantage. And that's what the ImpactOS platform is all about. So let's summarize this. We need to stop thinking about sustainability data in terms of regulation and compliance and talk about how that data brings real business value. Some of the key takeaways: the primary problem is not data collection, it's about creating that data in the supply chain in the first place. For data creation, suppliers must have capability and motivation. That's what we mean by empowering your suppliers. It's very hard to get any visibility beyond your direct suppliers without the right mechanism. Our platform offers a solution that is. And finally, primary sustainability data is essential for business development and smart and reliable decision making. Our platform role is to really help with the data creation and automation. We know this is essential for business development, but what you build on top of that foundation of data and how it can be used, that's where we turn to our amazing partners like Futurice. So I would like to say thank you everybody for joining, and Jona will come for the next session. Thanks.
Perfect. We had a note for Sami to remember to resize the screen, which he ironically almost forgot. But that's what notes are for. One piece of trivia I also can't help but share is that CAPTCHA actually is an acronym that stands for Completely Automated Public Turing Test to Tell Computers and Humans Apart, which I think is just an elegant acronym. Perfect, but it really is true that what you can't see, you can't improve. And having visibility to what's going on actually in the supply chain is critical to gain any business advantage and lead a true transformation, which is what our next speaker, Lisa, will talk about. But let's not put the cart before the horse, because she deserves an introduction as much as anybody. Lisa Paavilainen is Principal Advisor for Strategy and Transformation at Futurice, our chosen technology partner. And Lisa also, as it turns out, has a quarter of a century experience in digital transformation. Lisa, please go ahead and take it away.
So, good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Paavilainen from Futurice. And briefly about our company. So, Futurice is a Finnish digital transformation company. We are about 800 experts that are serving our clients, both the private and the public sector clients in the Nordic countries, in Germany and in the UK. And I'm here to talk a little bit more about the kind of what is leading sustainability with data. So what goes kind of beyond the reporting. And I would like to start with a very nice quote from our client from Sweden. So she says that, to me, the sustainability reporting, the CSRD, was never just about compliance, but about being a tool for engagement. Its real impact has been to pull sustainability out of the sustainability department and into core business functions. So what comes kind of after the reporting, the compliance rush? It's a kind of how can we put the sustainability into the heart of the company's strategy. And in this way, the sustainability transformation is then touching the whole company. So the team is basically a change agent. And how can we then nurture the collaboration between the business units and the other functions? And where are we now? So everybody's now kind of reading the first versions of the CSRD reports and learning about that. We're waiting for the kind of the feedback from the EU about the kind of what would be the next step with the omnibus, etc. But if you look at the kind of where are we at the moment, we believe that there are very strong catalysts at the moment, kind of showing that the sustainability is here to stay. And we need to kind of put a lot more kind of emphasis on that, and especially how do we lead with the data. So we believe that the investors and the financial sector, they are not going to drop it. So this is going to be a kind of core of the how they look at the best of the best companies. The big companies who have now kind of started the work, they're going to continue, and they're going to kind of pull their partners and the suppliers to work with them. The public sector procurement is driving this topic very strongly. Green transition that is now happening in the energy sector, very big factor as well. And the food sector, they would like to kind of show the transparent kind of way how their chain is working. And what the CSRD reporting brought to us. So it brought kind of a structured way to describe and report the emissions, the sustainability topics. And we talk about the Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3 emissions. So it means that it doesn't kind of limit us only kind of looking at our company, but it's a kind of extending that to kind of how do we actually work with our own value stream together with our partners and suppliers. And if we look at the kind of the total amount of the emissions, we'll see that the scope 3 emissions comprise approximately 80% of the emissions. So we can't kind of drop that. We can't kind of avoid talking about the kind of the whole value stream. What is happening in the upstream, but also in the downstream. So we have talked a lot about the reporting and monitoring. And if you look up then kind of the data that we use, it's what we call the passive data. It tells us what has happened already. And it's very important. It has its place, a kind of telling us how are we progressing towards our goals and what are the kind of the indicators that we'll see that something is changing. But then the kind of the challenge is that how do we turn the passive data into active data? So it's kind of data that helps us to contribute to the actual development of the sustainability. How to kind of identify the opportunities for innovation, how to identify the opportunities to actually kind of offer new business models. And this is not possible unless we collaborate within the company and we together with our partners. It demands a cross-functional kind of way to work. Okay, and then looking at the kind of some of the challenges, but I also hope that I will be able to kind of give you some kind of ideas how to tackle the challenges in a positive way. So one of the challenges is that we'll say that we don't have the sustainability data available. Where to start? So I'd like to kind of introduce you a couple of case examples where we have worked together with our clients on this area. So the first one is with Lassila and Tikanoja, where we work together with their environmental services. And what we did was the kind of developing digital services that were kind of helping their clients to operate better and to do better business. So we talked about a kind of developing a self-service portal for monitoring the waste management data and the environmental impact. We developed a tool for kind of helping the waste management service deliveries, planning, and also the kind of worked on the construction site services. And here kind of seeing that the portal was helping us to kind of create the data, but also the kind of helping the client to automatically then report the sustainability data. Then another example from the retail sector. So here the kind of the key objective was to how can we serve our consumer customers better? How can we provide them a better customer experience? And we worked together with an application that was helping the consumers to get information about food, healthier food, plan their meals, plan their grocery shopping. And the data was helping the retail chain to actually plan their kind of products that they were offering better, helping them to increase the locally produced products, helping to increase the local food providers, but also to kind of reduce the amount of the food waste. And the third example is from the energy sector. So a new energy company called Ilmatar, working in the Nordic area, building very, very extensively wind power in the Nordic countries. And when they started, they kind of realized that they are not able to kind of operate efficiently unless they have an access to real accurate data, real-time data, because the kind of the wind power is of course kind of fluctuating depending on the weather conditions. And we work together on a kind of a system that is helping them to kind of run the smooth operate and plan and optimize their operations. But it's not just kind of them. They were also kind of able to provide their clients good quality data for the kind of the energy emissions. So these examples were kind of how to able to kind of lead with the data. How can we work with the numerical data? But then we have also the challenge that quite big amount of the sustainability data is non-numerical data, and we believe that the kind of the modern AI tools will bring us the kind of now the capability also to be able to handle the data that is in the format of documents and policies, etc. So, for example, kind of apply that for risk management, kind of observing what is happening in our supplier pool, and kind of identifying topics that would be then valuable for the leading the sustainability thing. Okay, so sustainability transformation, leading with data. So how to get there? Our strong recommendation is to start collaborating within your own company, kind of looking at identifying that what do you actually need as a company, what you actually need in order to be able to better lead the activities. If you don't have the data available yet, look at then what would you need and what would be the kind of the way to make that available. And let's remember that sustainability is a journey. It's a long-term. It needs a long-term commitment. You need to kind of start with the small steps. You need to learn continuously and then kind of improve. That's the way to kind of towards leading with sustainability with the data. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lisa. And we'll huddle in here. I'll scoot my chair over there. Perfect. And we'll have a little Q&A section here. Sami, come on over here as well. Thank you so very much, both of you, for your excellent presentations. And now we'll have a couple of questions to go through. I'll throw one at each of you, and we'll see how it goes. These were sent in beforehand. If there are questions in the chat, we will get to them probably after the session. So please feel free to have them there and we will get back to you. But for this session, I have a couple of interesting questions for you. For Sami, first of all, in your experience, what are the biggest barriers organizations face in turning sustainability data into action? What are the obstacles of the data being actionable?
Well, I would say, first of all, the non-availability of reliable data. I think it's easier for companies to generate data about their own operations. So what direct impacts they might have on their environment, or maybe on their staff, as well as the society surrounding them directly. But then immediately, when it becomes a question of the supply chain, whether it's so-called upstream, so where the production takes place, the earlier stages, or it goes to the consumption phase, use phase, and the grave, that's where things tend to get quite hairy. And when you don't have the information, you are normally operating with a lot of assumptions. It may be that the assumptions are correct, but you are still kind of taking potential risks in terms of whether you're going to the right direction, doing the right things, or able to prioritize. That's also an important thing, because resources are limited, time, money. So without correct and accurate data, it's difficult to also do prioritization.
Yeah, perfect. I think the more we can avoid hairy things, the better. That is my personal opinion. Well, for Lisa, how do you ensure sustainability is not just owned by one team, but it's more of a strategy and an embedded way of working across the organization?
So I encourage the companies to actually kind of start working as a team, to kind of looking at that, what the sustainability actually means for the businesses, what it means for the functions. I see that that's the only way to kind of put then the kind of the thing more in a to the core of the strategy.
Yeah.
And also to kind of what do we need from different functions from different parts of the organization or our partners in order to kind of really start leading with the sustainability in the part of the strategy.
Yeah. And coming from sort of outside the industry of sustainability, if you can call it that, one problem might be that it's difficult to understand the benefits, which is why obviously I'm preaching to the choir here, but that's why it's important to have these kinds of webinars. And please share the recording because that is going to be available for you. One last question to sort of there are a lot of terms in the space of sustainability. And even in this webinar, we've talked about downstream, upstream, scope 3, value chain, supply chain. Can we sort of clarify the meanings of all of those different terms? Because I think a lot of information gets lost in translation, whichever one of you wants to start.
Well, first I want to check how much do we have time. This is going to take maybe an hour and a half. Depends on how technical we want to go.
We want to go brief.
Let's try to keep this as simple as possible. So if we talk about the supply chain, oftentimes because of the scope 3, first of all, that we sometimes use is terminology that tends to come out from the greenhouse gas emissions calculation because of according to the greenhouse gas protocol standard, scope 3 means the supply chain. If we want to use that and still this kind of analogy, the supply chain can be divided into roughly 2 sections. One is the kind of what happens from primary production through all the stages of value addition until a product or a semi-finished product, for example, arrives to your company. That's the upstream value chain or supply chain or scope 3. Then when you sell or the product passes onwards from your gates, for example, to customers or your B2B clients, it could be consumers, that's the downstream supply chain. And that's when you talk about the use phase of the product and the end of life of the product. So there's a company, there's upstream value chain, or oftentimes also invariably used supply chain, and then there is the downstream.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
and Lisa, it's also true that for different companies, the effects happen in different stages of the production. For example, there are some companies that have a more significant impact in the upstream, and for others, it's in the downstream. So do you see how any of these kinds of differences affect the organizations in terms of their sustainability data availability or the ability to utilize it?
Of course, the kind of what is, for example, what is happening in the upstream, it's very, very kind of essential to understand for the companies that are in the industrial sector or in the retail. Anything where we're kind of having a heavy production is.
And if I might add, it's interesting to see that particularly we're talking about these other functions than sustainability in a company that could or should benefit from sustainability and sustainability data. Let's take sales, for example. They are really keen on getting better data about the use phase of the products that they're selling.
Exactly.
Because that's where they can potentially also demonstrate that the sustainability performance of their products when they sell them to their customers is better compared to their competitors. And that's another challenging set of data to generate and collect, but we need to work towards that and go beyond just modeling and try to get as accurate data on that as well.
Yes, exactly. And having worked in the sales function of ImpactOS for a couple of months now, and having had 200 different conversations with different sorts of clients, it's really obvious from that sample size that the benefits of sustainability across organizations are not understood. Sustainability functions understand them, obviously, but how it translates to sales, for example, that's more difficult to understand, and also stuff where we have to educate the clients on how to actually transform the data into actionable into action. That's what I'm really trying to say in simple terms. But we have run out of time, so the rest of the questions that you have in the chat, we will get back to you via email. You will also have access to this recording available as soon as the webinar ends. And with that said, thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Sami. Thank you, Lisa. It was a pleasure, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.